Yeah, that feels like 7 seconds.
Great cameras. Great cameras.
I love the lighting and the framing.
It changes everything.
Welcome to my podcast, The Limitless Creative. In this episode with The Fridge, we'll go over all the details of making your first short film. His short film, called Invictus, ended up ranking among top 15 animations of the Rococo Animation Challenge. We'll break down the entire process by going over the idea generation, important considerations, lighting techniques, composition, scene optimization, the mindset, the whole deal. I do apologize for the sound quality from the side of the fridge because of some technical faults, but I do promise that there are lots of valuable insights. Let's get to it. Hello. Welcome.
Hello.
So, for those of us who are getting to know you for the first time, do you mind just telling us who is The Fridge?
The fridge is I am the fridge. It's just basically my gamer tag or my trade name now. It's what I go by on my Instagram and my YouTube channel. It's what I...
Is there a story behind it?
There is a story, but that's probably not the best.
For another day.
Okay.
Before we go into the technicalities of everything, what was the motivation behind it? Like, how did you come up with a concept?
So we had this Rococo challenge that was just announced by the team at Rococo, and I wanted to make a medieval scene in those days, basically, because I got the new BMS pack, which had really good characters, and I wanted to use them, basically. Yeah. So the inspiration was to sort of make something that seemed like it could be like a game trailer or like a show trailer, and the idea behind the challenge was to make it seem like it was like part of a TV show or something that you would just flick your channels by and try to like stop and see what it is.
I see. What's the story of the film?
Well, basically in my head it was that there's this knight who is looking for someone, sort of kind of incorporating the Witcher story, I guess, in which there's like a knight.
Okay.
No, he's not a knight, I know, but he's like the Witcher. He's trying to look for Ciri. So there's the guy who's looking for some female character. We don't really know who or what that is yet, what relation she has. But he's interrogating another enemy knight to ask, like, where is she? And then she's sort of just running around. We don't know if she's escaping from us or if she's escaping from like the enemy, and we're just trying to catch up. So just trying to keep it like all suspenseful and like exciting, I guess.
Yeah. We'll talk about the suspense portion of the film as well, because you really conveyed it really well, with especially the sound design, which we'll come down to as well. So lots of good things to talk about. What was the planning behind all of it? Did you write a script, or did you make a storyboard? How did you go on about planning the entire thing?
To be honest, I'm not sort of guy who does scripts or anything. I just had something in my head. And I actually didn't know what I was going to make. When I started off, I had no idea what I was going to make. It kind of all boiled down to using Rococo animation, so whatever I can sort of do practically as well as what I can find on Mixamo to sort of incorporate that as well. And then just doing one scene, and then I got an idea, another spark, and then the next scene would be a sort of a follow-up from that. And then I would make 2 or 3 scenes and then just try to piece them together, add another few scenes to sort of make it into one continual storyline. So I had no idea what I was doing. I just had one image in my head and I just recreated that. And that was the, when you see the actual footage, you'll understand better, but it was the one in which he is interrogating the knight. So that's the only one I had in mind.
Yeah. I think it reiterates the point as well to just start doing something rather than to just spend ages on the planning phase. Yes, if you're making a Hollywood level film, then there is the entire process that you need to go down. But when you're doing your own personal projects, I think it's a good way to just start the thing and figure out as you go.
Yeah, for me, I think I prefer the action phase of the whole project instead of the thinking phase. And the thinking phase is always like a continual thing anyway. While you're making something, you have more ideas and you sometimes branch off and do something completely different, even if you had written a script in the first place. So I think it's better to just do it intuitively.
Yeah, but do you not think that script gives you a standing point or somewhere to start out from, or even if you have some standing point in your head, it kind of gives you a map. So how would you classify working with a script and without a script or some sort of map on paper?
I think script doesn't have to be like a sort of stepwise, word by word sort of script. It could just be like a general idea of like scene 1 interrogation, scene 2 running, scene 3 something like that. Just so you have an idea of what you actually are going to do and how the story is going to play out and how it follows from one scene to the next. But some people do prefer to write it line by line, word for word, like exactly these many frames is going to happen, this much animation is going to be happening. That's, I guess, personal preference.
Yeah. All of it goes in parallel with these sort of time constraints.
You can't just do one thing and be done with it.
Yeah, definitely. So going into a bit more scene building side of the things, were there any specific places that you gathered assets from, or did you make your own? Or how do you normally go about creating the asset?
Well, as you know me very well, so I don't really make my own assets or textures or models or anything, as I would like to focus on the art part of it, or the environment building, as you'd say. So the models and the assets were mainly from big, medium, small. They have a really great medieval pack, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah, they do, don't they?
And they have really high quality assets with textures, which I just love to use. Most of them were from that. If I needed some extra assets or props, I would either use Kitbash or maybe Sketchfab. These three are basically my main resources anyway, for the models and textures and assets and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think you make really good point in saying that you don't have to make all of the assets. You don't have to be the entire you don't have to be the person that goes through the entire pipeline from 0 to 100. And you kind of have to play the cards accordingly, because you really can't do the work of an entire studio on your own.
Exactly.
So you basically have to decide where do you stand on the production spectrum and what is your end goal. At least that's how I like to think. So if your end goal is making a cinematic, then we don't want to waste time creating the assets. Not to mention the assets, good assets do take time. And secondly, if you're doing something else, oftentimes then you're not that perfect in making those assets. And someone else who just makes the assets will do a great job in making the assets that you can use then to art direct your scenes and then basically direct your shots. So I guess what you're saying is that what I think that you're saying is that we need to focus on the goal that we have with 3D. So if we're making cinematic, then just focus on the directing part of things. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying, because my goal here was to make a 7-second short, right? It wasn't to create a model or texture something. And even if I would have done everything myself, it would have taken way too much time, and still the quality would not be up to par, because I wanted it to look high quality, and the only way is to get high quality assets. So if I make something and it's not high quality, it kind of, you get the idea that it's actually not a high quality video, even if the lighting is awesome, even if the direction, camera angles, all the stuff is awesome. If the textures or the models are off, you get it from like frame 1, you get the idea that it's a subpar video.
What do you think, in your opinion, is the make or break thing in a scene?
I think number 1 would be lighting, because if your scene is not well lit, it will either look realistic or cartoonish or flat or whatever. And the second thing, I think I would give textures, like the details in the textures. Even if you have a bad model, you can get away with it if you have good textures. But even if you have an epic model, if you have like 240p textures, you're not going to do very well. I
agreed.
think these are the two most important things.
agreed 100%. So what I like to say is that if you've got a bunch of photo scans, which are obviously real life textures and models that you capture, and if you light it with an HDRI, which is also a real life high dynamic range image, so both of those are derived from a real life source. And so you've nailed the lighting, you've nailed the texture, and if you put these together, the scene will look kind of realistic if you just put in a little bit more effort in it.
That's very true, especially with the really hyper real assets that they provide at Megascans with Unreal Engine and everything. They have all the best photo scans, and you really can't tell them apart.
Yeah. So speaking of the softwares, what softwares did you use? Were there any particular ones that you preferred, or what was the entire shebang about the softwares that you used in this?
Well, I like to use 3ds Max, as you know. Just kidding. Of course, this was made in Blender.
Well, your history is 3ds Max.
History is 3ds Max. All made and created in Blender. The only things that I used were, like I said, Sketchfab. That's not really software, but like for assets, I'd say the Quixel Bridge for the Megascans if needed. Apart from that, I pretty much just used Blender and After Effects for compositing. There wasn't any use of any sort of third-party assets like for Embergen or sculpting or anything. I wasn't really doing anything except art directing. I was just picking assets up, placing them in the scene, and acting as a director, which is what I was doing. And then the post processing in After Effects. I think that was it. So this is just one of the scenes in which was basically one of my main scenes, in which this knight is interrogating the other knight. I'm just going to turn on the rendered view as well so you can see what's going on as we move around.
The power of RTX.
So let me just start off with actual animation. This animation is actually was a long animation, as you can see over here, which I chopped down while I was constricting the frame range from 28 to 76 with a camera change at frame 50 so that we can tell it was just how I set my shots up. The important thing is, I think, is the cameras. If you set up your cameras early, then you can sort of guide yourself or set up your scenes accordingly, even if they're not so, let's say, practical or realistic. For example, if I just give you a short example, this is just a plane for the ground, which is pretty much just floating, and it's not really connected, and this pillar is not really connected to the floor or anything. But the thing is that we're not going to be able to see the floor. Let me just show you. So in this scene, you can't even see the floor or anything else. So since this is all I can see, it doesn't really matter what's going on over here because this is all the viewer's going to see.
Yeah, definitely.
The same goes with stuff like the neck over here. You can see how twisted and tangled up it is. But in this rendered view, you can't really tell that it's such an extreme angle. And
that is genius.
He would be breaking his neck right
almost looks broken.
So I think some things you hide with lighting. Like I would have, what do you call it? I would have purposely hid some of the details with like a light box or like a plane on top to sort of hide some of the light, as to sort of bring the focus up to the girl who's jumping around in the background. She doesn't have a cape now, but but that's fine. So
the cape was a cloth simulation, was it?
It was this cloth simulation, which is just de-rendered,
which is
simulated itself.
The cache,
but you can see
cache is not there.
It's there. It is there, but it's so. This is basically the cloth simulation, which is, I don't know why it's displaced, but it doesn't really matter right now. But that's it. Basically, just following character.
You could do the simulation in Marvelous Designer as well. Was there a particular reason you chose not to, or
Yeah, Marvelous Designer.
What was the thing?
I played around a lot in Marvelous Designer, but with something as complex as an animation like this, I think Blender does a horrible job at simulating the clots. Marvelous does do a good job, but it is a bit tedious to sort of get an animated model. First, you have to get it in the T-pose and then play it in Marvelous, and then it slowly converts. Which I did try actually. Gave a lot of time into this, and it didn't turn out so well. And plus, the textures and stuff, they just don't match when you re-import it and stuff. It's a bit annoying. But if you see this last scene that I was building, this has a sort of a plot simulation to it as well, but it was also just done in Blender because it was pretty much standard plot simulation, although this is still, I would say, subpar for me, but in the actual render you can't really tell as much.
Just a quick interjection to tell you about Cascade. It's a real-time cloth simulation library with drag and drop functionality, so all the nuances that we talked about don't really exist when you're working with Cascade. It's pre-simulated with high fidelity, so you don't have to simulate anything, and it runs real-time. You can bunch multiple of these together to add more detail to the scene, or just make anything that undulates, and they all run side by side. Now, back to the podcast again.
You can see my scenes are very bare bones sort of scenes. They're just exactly what the camera would see. There's nothing on the top over here, there's nothing behind over here. There's literally nothing in the whole scene apart from what you can actually see. Obviously you can go ahead and add as much detail in the frame that you want, maybe a few more characters or something in the ground, but that's just personal preference and with how much time you have, I guess.
Definitely. I guess in softwares like Unreal Engine, you get to make the entire scenes and entire sets basically completely simulated in 3D. But in DCC softwares like Blender, you really need to optimize your poly count, your texture count, your texture resolutions, and I think that's the smart way to go about it. It doesn't matter how much memory you've got. It doesn't matter what resources you have. If you've got a beast machine with you, it will bog down if you it will bog down if you load like 4K textures on everything. So optimization really I think is a big part in every step of the process.
Speaking of optimization, if I just show you my scene right here, I don't know if you can tell how bad these textures are right now. Even the wall textures, they're almost a blur.
Oh, yeah, amazing, interesting. Yeah, definitely.
That is because even though I am running a RTX 4090, if you see my render settings, I still have the simplify on, which I can turn off, which is not a huge deal. You see the textures improve greatly right after I turn it off. But since it was not needed, and it was just slowing down my computer and renders anyway. So I just turned it off. There was a lot of optimization going on in this scene actually, with rendering, with the process, with the sort of simplify add-ons and other add-ons that I use for cameras and stuff. So yeah.
Okay, so what kind of optimization would you recommend for us to optimize our scenes when we animate? Are there any cheat sheet or tips that you can just shed some light on for optimizing memory, optimizing the scene, making the viewport fast?
The inbuilt ones, at least, I love the simplify option that you have, because you can actually set your viewport and render settings differently, which I have done. Which you can see my texture limit is 128, which is basically nothing, the lowest one. For my render settings, I didn't really change much. The texture limit is still 2K, so at least to keep 2K textures. apart from that, I had an add-on which is called Memsaver. I think you've heard of it. That I also was using that for saving memory. If I can find it, I can't find it right now. And that helps with sort of optimizing your RAM usage and stuff with textures, especially the ones that are in the background or some things that you are not using. Apart from that, I think when you're making a scene, it's very easy to sort of duplicate objects and have objects in your scene by the end that you're not really using. For example, I've just left this one, just as a simple example. This is something that was never seen in any of the sort of renders. It's just there because I just don't need it and I just sort of dragged it away. And instead of deleting it, it's just there. But this is just one of the many things that there may be in your scene. So I think if you just, at the end, before you render, or in the middle, maybe if you're feeling like it's getting slow, just go ahead and see what you need, what you don't need, delete the stuff. And then if you go to purging your data, you can purge all your data blocks as well. If I just where is it? Yeah, so if you go to orphan data, this is there's a purge option right here. Not sure if you can see it. And then you can sort of delete all the materials and stuff that you're not using in your scene currently. But that's
that's good. So speaking of textures, what size textures do you normally use? Do you go 4K, or is there a formula for this resolution of textures?
There's no fixed formula that I use personally, but obviously anything in the background doesn't need as much texture resolution, and anything in the foreground needs a lot. Unless I'm doing a macro shot, I wouldn't go for 4K. I usually just stick to 2K and under. If it's a macro shot or something that you can see really close up to the camera, I wouldn't go for 4K because that's usually overkill, especially when you render it out. You can't really tell a difference much between 2K and 4K. The maps that make a difference are in the displacement maps, because in displacement max, the 4K and 2K textures do give quite a lot of difference with the details, especially of the ground terrain and stuff, that they have more bumps and rough edges and stuff. So those I sometimes do still use 4K, even if everything else is just 2K, depending on how close again my camera is. That's about it for the textures. It's not like I set the textures up for each individual object. It's sometimes what you just get with them if you are downloading assets. If you can, I would swap them out, but if not, then you can use something like Memsaver to sort of analyze and use your camera, and then it just sort of tapers it down accordingly.
I think you make a really good point here, that you don't have to use everything 4K or 2K. You can use diffuse maps at 2K, and you can use normal maps or displacement maps at 4K, which matter sometimes more. So that is a good tip right there. We can see that the lighting here is very nicely done as well, and it really shows the tension, the drama of the scene. How did you go about lighting your scene, or how do you generally go about lighting your scenes? That's part one of the question. And secondly, how did you go about lighting this particular scene?
So usually I think I start from thinking about what's happening in the scene and what I want to show and what I don't want to show. It doesn't really matter unless there's very specific things that you want to sort of portray. It doesn't matter what direction the light comes in or what color it is. Usually in your scenes you have a lot of flexibility in those things. What you don't have, or what you should be focused on, is what you want to sort of highlight and what you want to hide. So if I go to my other scene, just so it makes it a bit easier maybe. So if I just show you this scene, this is a duplicated scene in an isolated environment. For the scene before this one, if I just go back and show you. This one. You can't really tell because the lighting is so similar, but this is the one that preceded the the scene I was just showing you. And this is in an isolated box environment with a plane, as I explained earlier, to block out some of the light, which sort of gives you these
perfect.
shadows and then highlights these sort of, although there's no actual face or facial expressions, you might notice that because of the head movements, it does feel like he's sort of struggling, or maybe there is some emotion inside him. And I just wanted the viewers to sort of focus on this area, which is why I used also, you might have noticed, depth of field, which is very nicely blurred out. So it's all about dragging your focus to one thing. And I think everything you do, every decision you make in the 3D scene should basically be because of what sort of attention you want the viewers to have. So lighting, like I said again, this is just a plane, which if I remove it, you can't really tell the difference because let me see. Because this power is turned off.
Yeah.
But anyway, if you see, this was something I was experimenting with. I'm not sure if you can see it so well. The shadows, I just turned it off for experimental purposes, but that's one of the things I use. Usually a light which is in the same direction as the HDRI that you use, or similar direction, and then you can sort of play with the sharpness and the angle and everything with it, depending on how sharp you want the lights to be, because no one else knows actually what's happening, what time of day it is, or whatever in this sort of a scene. So it's better to sort of create stuff artificially, as well as having an actual natural HDRI to give you sort of a basic color variation of a real life environment, and then you play with the other steps with. That's the first thing with these. Like I have a spotlight over here as well, sort of to portray the same sort of angle. Also with that is of course the volumetrics, which
that's what I was gonna get to next.
Yeah, the volumetrics is also just part of the lighting part. I'm not sure you can see it so clearly over here, but the idea was for her to sort of be jumping up in slow motion, and then there's some volumetric fog lights that are just sort of being created due to the silhouette and the body of I'm not sure if you can see these fog lines. That's all due to the fog boxes basically that I have covering the whole scene, and then there's lights coming from this side, sort of making a silhouette, and also passing through and causing those volumetric lights, which are basically naturally made instead of artificially done in post, because I think this is something that is dynamic and you can't really do something like this in post so well.
What's your take on volumes?
Volumes I use a lot. I think without a volume, even if it makes no difference, there is a difference that you can't tell. It's like subtext. There is something going on that you can't see, but your mind can't see. Like your mind can't feel it, but your heart feels it. Like something's better in this, I think, and that's what we call atmosphere, or it's something that's palpable. You can't see it because it's basically volume. It's fog. It's supposed to be transparent, but it gives you that sort of grain and that sort of light tapering. As you go away from it, or the light goes away from you, and especially with these volumetrics, it actually depends on what you want to use the volume for, because in most of my cases, either the volume is for volumetrics, or like a fog, like a low-lying fog, or something to sometimes hide a part of the scene with some fog. And all of them are done in different ways. Sometimes you use emission, sometimes you use density, sometimes you use like noise, textures, and roughness, and all that stuff. But I think volume, every scene you should be trying to just put in volume somewhere or another, and you'll see the difference. You will see the difference.
Yeah, I guess in 3D, like we're simulating everything. We're simulating lighting, we're simulating textures, we're simulating models, obviously. And oftentimes we do miss simulating the atmosphere through which the light travels. And I think that really ties in with selling the entire look of it. And I totally agree with the thing that you said, that even if you don't see a difference, you would see a difference in the final render because of that palpable, tangible thing that you can notice in the final render. So yeah, I totally agree.
Good old-fashioned volume with cycles, or with a good graphics card, I'd say. Nothing can beat that, hands down, even if you do everything. Like I said, in this scene, you can. I don't think there's a really good way to sort of mimic a volumetric light with a dynamic sort of character animation going on as well, unless you do something in post that's really sort of magic.
Yeah, that's true.
If it's apart from that, I'd say mist passes you can use. It really depends on what the volume is for. If it's just for atmosphere or creating that tapering of the light or the depth effect, you can use a mist pass. If it's something like fog or low-lying fog, you can get away with fog planes if it's just like straight camera angle, or if it's not like a crazy camera move. But if it's not any of those, then I think volumetrics with the actual volume boxes and doing it in 3D or in Blender is probably the best way to go. It is very taxing, that's true. Eevee does do some volumetrics. It's not the best, but I don't know if Eevee Next is coming up, so if it has anything for us in volumetrics. But if not, usually if you want to do volumetrics, you just go to cycles.
I often get this question quite a lot, that what system is good enough? What is good enough for 3D? What are the system requirements that you can get away with?
Obviously, the more the merrier, but not everyone can afford the merrier. Even a few years ago, I was using a really bad laptop, which just lagged so much. The thing is, you can make any scene with any laptop as long as you have like the bare minimum graphics card that allows you to run render, essentially. The only benefits you get with better graphics cards and better memories and stuff is that you can either load more textures, high resolution textures, or just more like a bigger scene with more polygons in your scene. Apart from that, there's no real difference. It'll take you longer to render. You can use render farms as well. It will be a bit annoying, sort of trying to scroll through or pan your way around. But the final result, the render that everyone will see, won't really matter if you're using a 4090 or like a 960 or 950. The PC specs that I would recommend is something just bare minimum to at least get started if someone wants to get started with this. Okay. And VRAM, I'd go with VRAM. That's probably the most important thing if you feel like upgrading your setup. The VRAM is a thing that's actually going to be used in rendering while you're actually rendering, sort of while you're using, not like after the scene is complete rendering, but you really need to see what's going on to actually tweak it. I think that's what I found after getting my rig, is that there's so many things that you don't notice until you press F12 and you find out, oh wait, the render is shit, and then you find out, okay, the volumetrics are done, or the shadows are not good, or something looks off. But if you can see something sort of real time and catch it, sort of nip it in the bud, then you can quite easily just make adjustments on the go, and it saves so much time. That's probably the only thing. If you don't have a good machine, you can do it, it'll just take longer. That's the only thing.
Another thing I would like to add into this is, which you kind of mentioned as well, the online render farms, especially with the Blender. We've got Sheepit as well, and I think they've got the limit of 750 MBs now. And even if you don't have that sort of rendering power with you, Sheepit is sort of like a distributed render farm. And Blender community can render it for you, and that is really powerful.
That is really great,
so basically, all you really need is a hardware good enough to just make the scene, and you don't even need to render it. you can just send it to Sheepit, and that
Exactly.
takes care of it.
Exactly. Yeah. The render farm thing is really great. You can get like paid renders and free rendering render farms, but like you said, just get a machine that lets you work, and then while you sleep, someone
Yeah.
else can render as well. But at least you're
Yeah.
working. You can do your work at least.
Yeah, that's my take on hardware as well, that it should be sort of like an extension of your own self, so the extension of your mind and your arms and hands, and it should not really resist you in what you're doing. So if you feel like you're being resisted in a way, then that's probably an indicator that you might need to upgrade your hardware. If it's not resisting, if you're working at a level that's comfortable for you, you don't really need to upgrade. Like myself, I have a like mid-tier machine, and I don't really feel the need to upgrade. I might in the future, but currently it's doing the job that it's supposed to do, and it's all good. I noticed that you used motion capture as well. Would you shed some light on that as well?
Yeah, the whole point of the whole challenge was actually to use motion capture in some way or another.
Yeah.
They have apps, they have the suit. So I used their, they have one app that you sort of record yourself with your own phone and your camera and just import it, and it sort of tracks it onto the mocap suit, and then you can import it into your animation. So that's what I used. I do have a little breakdown that in which I show how I used it.
No, we'll make sure to link it down in the description.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a short, but if you have a mocap suit, obviously you don't really need anything else. It's probably the best thing you get to get.
Yeah.
But I think you should learn to be resourceful, and you don't always have to have everything, and so make use of what you do have or what you can get. So if you don't have the mocap suit, that's fine. Use your imagination and use the video tool that they've given you at Rococo and just record something yourself. If not, you can always use Mixamo. If not, you can always animate yourself or fix some of the animations yourself. So there's always a workaround. But it was interesting for me to sort of use Rococo and their video capture tools. I think that was a lot of fun.
Do you have a particular way to go about post-production? Do you recommend it? What's your take on post-processing the images that come out of the renderer?
I think post-production is paramount. You cannot live without it. You should not be posting anything without post-production anyway. Even if it's a simple color correction, I think it goes a long way. And nothing else. But if you want to do high-tech sort of compositing and stuff, you can also do that. There's a lot of things that you realize after you render that this is missing or this could have been improved. Something that's not just render-based or like 3D based, it could be something that can be done in post, such as flares or some mist or some color correction, or some small elements like sparks and stuff that might be in your scene. Then you can always add them in post. I think that's important. And also in post comes the, like I was saying before, the where you want the viewer's eye to go. So if you color correct properly, use vignettes and stuff, and you can actually focus, make the viewer focus a bit more. But yeah, it depends on your post-processing and editing skills as well. So not everyone is a pro in editing. They can use Blender maybe, but they can't use whatever new After Effects, whatever they want. So yeah, and I think we haven't mentioned this maybe as yet, but before the post-processing or After Effects part comes, if you're making a short film or if your goal is to make sort of like a short video like this, it's very important and it's very overlooked most of the time, the actual direction part, the actual art direction part. Because let's say there's a Hollywood movie or something and there is a specific person, just one person who's just directing and nothing else. He's not acting, he's not doing the lighting. He just knows that this is what I want to do. I just have to order these guys to do this. It's the same with 3D. You should not be focused on how to do it. You should be focused on what you are trying to achieve, what look you're trying to achieve. That's with the lighting, the camera angles, the realism to it, what story, what sensations, what feeling you want the viewer to have while watching your video.
Yeah.
And I think that's often overlooked. And
Yeah, completely agreed. And that's a golden nugget right here. I think lots of beginners fall into this trap as well, that we need to do everything ourselves, from making the model, texturing, entire pipeline, doing it themselves. But I think that's a shallow way, and you really put it in good perspective with cinematography as well. That you are if you are a director, then you need to assume the role of a director. You're not an actor, you're not a technical specialist. You are there to direct, to art direct, and to just really enhance the look of the visuals. One last thing would be sound design. I think personally, I love sound design. Whatever I make, I think I I do spend quite a lot of time in gathering all the sound assets, what I want the particular animation to sound like, and that really contributes to the experience that the viewers get.
that's very true.
And like it's often said that sound is half the picture, and maybe even more so. So how do you go on about your sound design and your take on the entire sound thing?
I have to admit, I'm not the very best of guys to be for the sound design. I am pretty much just running and gunning with the sound stuff. But I do agree with you that sound is more than 50% at least of the whole shot or your video, because if you watch something with no sound, or if it's muted or something, then you can't really tell what the vibe is, what the director or the movie is trying to tell you. It could be a girl running, and you don't know if it's a horror film running from someone, or if she's running on a jog, or if she's running to someone, unless you have context. And music is the first thing you listen to that gives you the context the quickest. So with music or like sound design, I mean, you can do so much in the first second. You can tell the viewer so much, and it's something that most 3D artists, I think, just overlook, because you're so much hyper focused on the visual side of things, and then you either just ignore sound design completely, or you just slap on a normal sort of sound or music or something, and you call it a day. So I think sound design is a completely different actual subject. It's like a whole different department that you should have proper sound engineers and everything for, if you want proper sound design. But it's always good to learn that skill as well.
Yeah, definitely. Are there any resources that you would recommend in either learning or acquiring the sounds?
I haven't really learned anything, I don't think, from sound. There is Epidemic Sounds that I used to use for sort of short snippets and stuff, and clips of different random things that you can just patch up together in your video editor, or just YouTube. Really, sometimes YouTube is the best if you can get some non-copyright sounds for music, or sometimes just whistles and birds and stuff like that. That it's probably just easiest to find over there. Apart from that, I don't really do sound design much or have any resources, I'd say.
Yeah, I think we've covered the major bits of it. Any concluding remarks that you would want to give? Any piece of advice?
I would say practice is probably the best thing. The more you practice, the more you learn. The more you learn from your mistakes, and experiment. Obviously, if you experiment with different things, sometimes you may be doing something 1,000 times but still not getting it right. But then you experiment with one thing and you find that it's much more down your alley or something. Also, maybe just choose or have in your mind what you actually want to do, instead of just dilly-dallying in a lot of different stuff. I think if you focus on one thing, you can use your resources, energies, and efforts towards one thing, instead of sort of just trying everything. It's good to have an idea of everything, but if you're just going to stay in that one place all the time, then there's no point. If you want, I mean, this is about a short film or a short video, but sometimes you just want to just model. Even like, for example, if you don't have such a good PC, maybe modeling and texturing might be something that you can achieve and you like, which is not so resource intensive. Some people just really like the aesthetics and stuff of things and want to really make stuff. So maybe modeling is your thing. But if you are wanting like art direction and stuff, then maybe you can start making short films and just keep making different short films. They don't have to be the best. You don't have to, but if everything else is bad, if you get the worst models, the worst textures, the worst sort of environment put together, but your art direction is on point, in 10 short films, your art direction would be so good. If someone replaces all your models with hyper real models, you have the knowledge of how to art direct or how to make a short film, and that's what counts, because you were in it for the models, you were in it for the art or the direction in the first place. So I think you really need to set your goals straight in the first place and then move on from there.
Yeah, perfect. Golden, amazing. Well, thank you so much. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you very much.
That's been really, really amazing. Really nice talking to you over your short film, and we'll meet again. Thank you.
Thank you.